Good evening and welcome to my stream. Tonight I'm going to be doing starting off with just something a little bit different. A couple months back, Corvus Belli, which makes the Infinity game, decided that they would shift some of their manufacturing to a thermoplastic called Siocast. And this is one of their Zond remotes, and there's been a lot of back and forth on whether or not, how much people like this, and the quality and things like that. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a review, and just wanted to kind of go over a couple things that I've found while working with Siocast, since I've put together, I think, about 3 packs of these. This is, well, 2.5. This is 1/2 of one of the packs, but I wanted to save it for the stream. So as you can see, it's got similar flash to what you would find on a metal model. The only thing is that it doesn't clip quite as nicely. It can kind of leave a little bit of some mark there. But these are some very sharp clippers, so it's actually not too bad. One thing I have found, though, is that you do tend to get, if you try and snip something that's too big, like this, you'll get breakage. And I'm not entirely sure what's causing that, but you just kind of don't get as clean as you would. Normally this would shear a piece of metal. This would be completely smooth, but the clippers almost like carve into it, and then it bows out and then springs back. So it's a little bit odd. You don't necessarily want to clip a big part of it. That's one thing that I've found. Having these bits was kind of nice. These were, I believe, what these antennas were attached to. And so having these has kind of allowed me to do some experimentation on it. Another thing that I've found is that you're trying to cut through a large chunk. Sometimes get, actually that worked fine. Nice that I'm doing this on stream. Okay, so I've had it before where I had some issues where it was actually kind of breaking. Well, you can kind of see it here. Kind of slips along some lines. And causes you not to get a nice smooth cut that you might want. So I found that if you're going to be cutting, what you want to do is almost shave. Shave is going to be the best. Also, if you do use something like a Wise Concise chiming in saying that material scientists could explain this, but I'm neither of those things, and neither is he. So I kind of just trying to find, what I'm finding with this as, someone who's worked with other things, other materials with like plastic and metal. One thing I've found is that if you use a saw, you're just going to scrape the crap out of this, and then that just causes a lot of what people are calling purling. And that is what this is. So like you can't really scrape it that well, or you just kind of leave this little bit of fuzziness, and eventually you're just going to need to shave that off. So when you're cleaning these up, my recommendation is just to use a sharp X-Acto knife. It doesn't have to be a new blade, but you'd probably want to change your blade out maybe a little more often than you normally would. I feel like with pewter you can have a duller blade because you can hit it with a rasp or a file afterwards. It's another thing you don't really want to use is a file, because again, you'll get that purling. If you have a really fine grit sandpaper, that can work. But you do run into those issues where, if you have a seam line that runs close to an edge, it can be a pain. And so again, that's where, a sharp X-Acto knife is going to be your best friend. So yeah, Weisskins is saying that, in the clipper's case, you're basically getting plastic deformation and then failure. As the clipper jaws close, they force the cylinder apart along the axis, and it's a failure at the central part of the cylinder before the clippers close completely, which is, what you're seeing where you can see that failure right there. So it's, it's cutting in, and then that part's breaking, and that's what's kind of leaving you with that weird formation. So again, you can use your clippers on smaller bits, but if you're trying to get a nice smooth, I would suggest a sharp X-Acto. Sharp X-Acto is probably your best friend when working with this stuff. Now I have repositioned things a little bit, just where I had a bend, just by warming some water, or boiling some water, dunking it, and then dunking it, dunking this into the water, moving the piece that I wanted to move, and then dunking that in some cold water. And that's helped to just kind of repose something that was maybe bent in the box, and then it's not how I wanted it. So that method does work with this material. One thing that you do want to be wary of, because I wanted to also kind of test what else could be done. Maybe quicker ways of fixing purling rather than so you wouldn't have to use a knife. I was wondering if maybe you could melt it, but it does. This stuff does melt, and it's not something you want to hit with open flame because it melts and deforms pretty badly, and does not quickly cool either. So don't get it next to open flame. I would suggest not doing that. Probably not going to be an issue as far as your standard play, unless you have some extreme games that you play. But I don't think this is something you need to worry about on day-to-day type of thing. But yeah, I feel like this stuff almost works a little bit like, with as far as some of the breakage that is kind of odd that you'll find. It's almost like it's acting like an oobleck or something, where it's soft, but once it gets to a point of pressure, it just gets hard, and then you're breaking it rather than cutting it. But again, sharp X-Acto, it's going to be your tool for this. I don't think this is, you're not going to really see, or I haven't really seen a whole lot of larger problems with mold lines than what you'd get on a metal model, or even hard plastic models from other manufacturers. But this is a little bit more of a precise job that you have to do to clean up if you're going to be extremely particular about having mold lines show up. And in some cases they're hidden pretty well. Some places not quite so much, so they might be a little bit harder to hide. Or it might be a little bit more difficult to paint over or ignore because they'll show up once you get some paint on it, or it gets hit by a wash. That tends to be where mold lines really show up, is when there's a wash, and then you gotta kind of hide them again. One thing I also wanted to note on these, so for the most part, I'm not having any trouble with, the manufacturing, such as, bubbles or things like that. I think there was one where I had a bit in one of these, where one of these little triangular points didn't completely form. But one thing I have noticed is on these remotes in particular, it looks like there's some type of engine, something like that. Adjust my light so you can see, and it's not terrible on this one, but it's a little bit rougher. Normally, I would just, if this was a metal version, I would take a file and just kind of, hit that and knock that out. But I feel like if I tried something like that, I'm just going to make it worse. And there's not really a good way to get in there with an X-Acto to really do anything. So you kind of have to just live with that, which is unfortunate. It's just not quite as tight. You lose some of the resolution that you have in there. Now it's a minor thing because again they have these little antennas that are going to be covering some of that up anyways. It's not a big part of the Mini, but it's just something that I think that to be aware of, and that hopefully that they'll be working on in future productions of new Minis. And also, there's the obligatory, I'm not getting paid for any of this. This is just the Mini that I bought for myself because I like the company, I like this army, and I just wanted to do a review since I work with sculpting stuff, and kind of give my opinion on the material. Now, in a lot of ways, I really like metal. It's where I started, because I started with the Sisters of Battle army, and that was all metal, so that kind of forced me to have to do a lot of working with metal if I wanted to do any type of conversions. And that's what then ended up getting me pretty handy with green stuff, because there weren't really parts to get kit bash in a Sisters of Battle army. But then, I started doing some stuff with plastic, with some of the plastic kits, and just shaving the model down and adding armor on top of with green stuff. So that was kind of my next thing. That was like the hard plastics with GW. And so this is my first with kind of this Siocast. They also had Aristea, which is their resin game. It's or PVC plastic game, and it's the first run. Some of the issues were that just the material wasn't getting the resolution that they wanted, and that was a lot harder to clean up. But in that case, if you had to find enough sandpaper, you could use that as well to clean things up. So, and by fine, I'm saying like 600 to 800 grit sandpaper is what you're going to want if you are planning to use that on, I think on PVC or Siocast. With the PVC, one thing I was able to do is actually hit it with just a regular file and then use a fine grit to clean that up. So you can file it. It's similar to like when you're trying to file green stuff. It's going to pearl if you don't have fine enough sandpaper. That's basically, it's just, it's not, seems to not be hard enough, so it just kind of rips and tears. But yeah, there's a little bit of flexibility to it. You don't want to bend it too much; it will break. I've seen, folks have received. I don't know about this model for sure, but I know one of their first models that they did. There's some issues where the legs were broken at the joint here, so definitely can break, though it is a little bit flexible. I'd say the main main advantage of the Siocast is how light it is. This entire model, is only an ounce or two, maybe a couple ounces, and so it makes these remotes that you're carrying around a lot less heavy. And if you have a lot of remotes, that's going to translate to a lot less heavy. But the other fun advantage that I'm actually kind of looking forward to is that I'm hoping that there's a version of this remote that's a airdrop remote called the Meteor Zond. And I'm hoping they'll do that in Siocast, because if they have just something like this with some kind of platform, hover bit to it, it'll be incredibly easy to just kind of mount on a really thin wire and get some fun dynamic flying poses. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to with this. The other thing that people were running into, I think with these ones in particular, is that the legs, not all the feet were actually fitting into the ground correctly, or snug on the ground. It's flexible enough and light enough that I think you can just glue it to the ground, glue that extra leg, and I don't think you're going to end up having an issue, because the springing back of it is not going to be that much. But if you really want to, again, the hot water technique works. Yeah, things like this. These are, I think, some of the bits. So it's got small injection points, it looks like, and these can get really annoying to get. You almost have to get them one by one. Whereas, with metal, you could just hit that with a rasp real quick, or, from a metal file, and it's just going to take them all off. But whereas here, they get that little bit that just wants to stay on. You kind of precisely cut them off. So it's a little bit slower going. I wouldn't say it's a huge problem, but it does take a little bit more care and a little bit more time than you can go, then you can clean up a metal model. Because usually with the metal model, you can find the seam line, bust out your files, and just file along that line, and then you're done. Whereas this, you do have to kind of find it with the knife, and sometimes that can be in a spot that's a lot more difficult to get to. And you do get things like this where you just kind of get that overhang. You would get that in metal as well, but that's something that I found with metal. I can just, again, get the file, hit it with hit it with the file real quick and kind of cut this out. But again, with the Siocast, you got to go in with the knife, and you got to be precise, and you got to kind of cut it out. And I'm not an expert on these. These are only, I think this is the eighth model that I've worked on that's been in this material. But it's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not too super steep. And as long as you're careful, or not too picky, I think it's fine. Yeah, I'd be looking forward to seeing them do as Meteor Sonda in this. I think they could. Meteor Sonda as it is right now is kind of nice, but I think they could sharpen up the design quite a bit. And make a really nice looking model. It would be a lot of fun to put on some dynamic poses. Or, dynamic situations. So I guess it wouldn't really be posing. So this is an area where it looks like it's got filled up here, which is a little bit frustrating. But I think that's something that I'll just deal with. Maybe be a little bit. So I'll do a little bit of cleanup, and then I think I'll just cover the rest of this when I paint. I'll try and clean that up rather than worry about it too much. Yeah, so you get those little bits, and they can be a little frustrating. So you do kind of almost need to like find a spot that you can drive them against. So you can do what I'm doing here. You just want to be careful, don't push too hard and slice your thumb or fingers. The nice thing about this material is it's very, very soft. So you don't have to use a lot of pressure as long as you have a sharp X-Acto. Like this one, not super sharp, but you can not exerting much force at all to get that shave right there. So yeah, as far as I know, CB's plans are just to use this for some of the larger models, like these type of remotes, and probably any tags that they do in the future for their core game, which are their tactical armored gears, which are kind of larger models than your 28 mil. And it's mainly seems to be prompted because of the tin prices, which have gone crazy in the past couple of years. So, in order to make it so that they can make these and still stay in business, basically, because if they price them too heavily, nobody's going to buy. These are a new set of remotes. There's the old remotes that are out there still. And I think enough people would not bother to buy these new ones if these, were suddenly a lot more expensive. So I think to kind of keep their costs down across the board, they can sell these. But again, that's maybe their internal finances, which I am not privy to. So I could be a liar. Yeah, I just wanted to do kind of a quick video, giving my review and my opinion of the Siocast, I think it's a fine material. I think there's probably some flaws that they need to work out just in some of the casting and how they part things out, because while it does seem like they can just kind of use a little bit more like a metal mold than they would like a hard plastic mold. I think the way things are parted out sometimes can just help the way that the material is going to flow into those casts, and that will change how they come out as well. Or making sure that the material flows into all of the spaces, because it's also a lighter material, and it's not spin cast like metal would be, so it doesn't flow in quite the same way. So I think that's something that they'll just need to be is going to be chalked down to experience. I think they did a great job with these remotes though. The Vostok, I feel like, which was their first large remote that they did, had some more errors that I ran into, but for the most part, this is the only area that I've found that's been problematic kind of consistently through these ones. Some of them it's worse, some of them it's like this, where it's pretty unnoticeable and pretty easy to hide with paint. But overall, that is Siocast. Just a different material, one that hopefully that they will continue to improve upon in their design and their tooling, but one that is completely workable as a miniatures material. And I just wanted to do this quick review before I get on with the rest of my stream. So I think I'm going to go ahead and close this one out and just start up a new stream so that I can have these separate videos, because I don't know how to do that otherwise. And I'll post this up on my YouTube channel at Nehemiah Hobby in case anybody ever wants to check it out again. But yeah, so that's it. That's Siocast. It's new material. Alright, so where's my payment? Wait, $4? I sold my integrity for $4?